What's happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Park Lane Podcast. A little bit slightly delayed tonight with watching England against Spain in the Euros final. But at least we have good news to come on and discuss as England won on penalties and now, again, back to back European champions. Tonight, I'm joined by a good friend, Wes. Wes, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. At least we have one thing in common with the national team, or at least one of the national teams, being champions of Europe and all that. And I know it's been a while since I've been on. I've had a few other work commitments, so yeah, had to kind of prioritize that, which is the reason why I haven't been on. And yeah, I've been getting in a bit too knackered, unfortunately. So I needed a bit of a rest. But it's good to be back tonight, and I'm sure we'll dive into quite a lot of different talking points as well.
Okay, on tonight's show, we'll be discussing. We'll have a bit of chat about the Euros final, because rightly so, we should really chat about that, and then we'll get into a bit of transfer talk, and then talk about yesterday's double header, which is unusual for pre-season or unusual in general. It seems to be for us to play two games in one day, but we'll discuss all about it. I shout out to a few of you in the chat, a few that were in early before we started. What's the point? FC said howdy chums, and no Morgan gives white. So the drama continues. Levy's got his hand down the back of the couch, hoping to find a few quid so he can conjure up enough money to bring in another potato with potential. Um, Jay has said frustrating that we couldn't get Morgan Gibbs White deal done. So all the drama continues, and that is another big we've lost out. Another big player we've lost out on. It's also worrying about Udogie being injured. We need to sign a left back ASAP. And then we've got where's his dad in the chat? Evening, my people, common new Spurs. And then your mom, evening all. And then David Clark always lets us know that he's in Leicester. So hi from Leicester, the same circus, just a different day. Do you know what? It's actually funny, really, talking about David Clark because last season, optimism was up here, and David Clark was as usual down here. I feel like we're slowly coming down and meeting him. So might not be that positive tonight, but we'll try. We'll try and do what we can do. We'll start with the positives, Wes, and that is England just won on penalty shootout against Spain in the Euros final. I tell you what, look, England haven't been that good at penalties throughout this Euros, but at least they weren't as bad as Spain because it was absolutely terrible. Didn't go off to the best of starts of penalty shootout. With obviously Beth Mead hitting the ball twice as she slips and then
Hmm.
is allowed to retake the penalty, but misses anyway. So the rule change really didn't help in that scenario. But look, um, some good goalkeeping from the England keeper in that penalty shootout. I mean, what did you make of the final itself? Looked like England were under the cosh quite a lot in the first half. Seemed to get back in the second half and then drop off in extra time. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that is definitely fair. I think Spain probably overall dominated the game. I think England had their moments, especially in that second half. Obviously, getting the goal with Russo and stuff like that. I believe that was in the second half anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just felt like England were just sort of hanging on in there a lot. And I feel like now, or after this tournament, so post tournament, I feel like now this team needs a refresh.
Yeah.
We've seen it in goal and up front. Obviously, no Mary Earps now; she's retired. Ellen White retired from the last Euros, so we've had that slight. But I think like Lucy Bronze needs to potentially step aside. I think she was getting a little bit exposed. For me, Jess Carter isn't of international level and international standard. I've seen London buses turn and move quicker, bless her, in rush hour. So yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is I'm coming out of this tournament with more questions regarding Serena than kind of being confident that she's the right person to take a foot, which sounds really strange because we've just won a tournament and yet it feels like I'm questioning the manager. But I just feel like selection wise, I get Millie Bright not being there is huge. It's a huge miss, and I think that's also affected the dynamic of the back line. I think Leah's probably not been her usual self without Millie Bright next to her. I feel like the substitutions, like if you look at the last Euros in particular, the subs were really key in terms of helping England get over the line in games. And I feel like this tournament, it's like chuck these lot on and let's see what happens. You know,
Yeah,
if it comes off great, we're through, and it's like brilliant, and then it kind of papers over a few cracks. So yeah, I just feel like the team and the squad needs just that little bit of a refresh now, and yeah, I feel like we are in a good moment and in a good space in the sense of we've got good young players coming through, not just Michelle Agyeman. You look at Grace Clinton, Aggie Beaver Jones, etc., coming through. So there is the talent there. Obviously, I'm working with players a lot younger, so I see the talent that is coming through, and I'm really excited by what I'm seeing coming through. This is just from a Milton Keynes perspective, so forget what's happening in the big cities of London, Birmingham, Manchester, etc., and what they've got to pick from. So yeah, I think English football from a female perspective is in a really good place. I just hope now we as a nation capitalize on it, like we did, say even 10 years ago at the World Cup in Canada. There was a real big boom, and then obviously since the last Euros, there's been an even bigger boom. And I just hope now that we can continue this momentum going forward. But no, fantastic for the girls. They've done it again. And yeah, credit to them, because to not only win a tournament once isn't easy. To then defend your title against the world champions who you've got previous with, because obviously the World Cup final we played against Spain and lost. So that's some like strength in terms of like mentality, character, you know, to effectively get revenge. I know it's not all about that, but yeah, no, credit where it's due to the girls.
like one of the things that we talk about a lot, especially being Spurs, fans, is mentality. Well, I do anyway. Mentality,
Yeah.
and it's always been something that we tend to have lacked. But as you say, it always felt from the start of the game today that even though we're 1-0 down, it just seemed written in the stars that England would win, because how it's gone in every single game. Especially the knockout phase, winning in late goals, scoring late goals, and even when it was the last knockings of extra time and they were defending, I wasn't as nervy as I would be if it was Spurs on the end of it. Do you know what I mean? Like it was in the Europa League final for Spurs, because you just know that there's a lot of these players who have that mentality from previous games, from having played extra time before, and fair play um, to England, especially the goalkeeper. To come in and save a few penalties in crucial time when it's needed. It's great. I also agree with you about refreshing the side. There's lots of players that played in probably both the last Euros and last World Cup. And it seems like it was safer in this tournament to pick the players that Serena Wiegman trusted, rather than going a bit kind of like off to the side and it not working. So now is the time, as you say, back to back Euro winner. Now's the time to try and change things up and refresh and see what we can do with a kind of fresher, um, hungrier squad. So let's see. It's exciting
Yeah.
times anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I say, the state that girls and women's football is in is probably the healthiest that I've known in my time being a football coach. Like the talent coming through now is ridiculous. Like it's absolutely outrageous. And like obviously I'm working with players that aren't even signed. Some are signed to clubs, some aren't. And I'm even looking at some of the girls that aren't signed, and I'm like, what's going on here? Like the levels are just going up and up each year. And I think now we're just getting to that kind of standard of like, right, this is what an England player should look like, or this is what a player that's going to play, for example, in the WSL or in the Championship, the second tier. I think it's WSL 2 now, or whatever it's called. So, yeah, I think we're in a good moment. Let's capitalize on it. Let's get our house in order in terms of getting the structure and the pyramid right now to allow more girls the opportunities to experience nights like tonight and like we did 3 years ago, because it is special. I was at Wembley a few years ago, and to witness what that did for people like on that day, and my first thought was naturally to the girls that I've coached, and I'm like, that's for them, because what I don't think people realize and understand is they have to work twice as harder to get spotted, to get the recognition they deserve, um, because they're a girl playing football, and stereotypically it's not the done thing. I know society is changing, but my like when we won it three years ago, my first thought was, to a clutch of players that I've worked with, and I kind of went to myself like, that's for you girls who have had to play in boys teams because there's no girls teams, to have had to have been, wearing boys kits and, all of that kind of jazz. So yeah, it for me it was just that kind of moment, like I say, for the girls that I've coached who are now slightly older and are knocking on the door of, say, what you'd class as a scholarship age. I thought 3 years ago it was for them, and it's like now I think this one's pretty much for kind of everybody to enjoy. But I think now the pressure's on the FA and the governing body who now look after the WSL in particular. Get your structure right, and let's back the whole tiered system in the football pyramid for girls and women in this country now. Because if we don't, then what's the point?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I completely agree with you on that one. Right, that's a perfect way to move on. Let's move on back to Spurs, and let's talk about
Oh,
the news that broke last night. I know, which was that kind of feels like inevitable now, but Morgan Gibbs White has signed a new contract with Nottingham Forest, meaning that any potential move to Spurs is off. And I tell you what, it felt just like a hostage, video that we've seen
hmm.
over the years. Not ideal, but look, the way it was done was just crazy, right? So the Nottingham Forest owner has flown out to Portugal to go and meet face to face with Morgan Gibbs White, and effectively looks like forced him to sign a new contract, and then not only is Morgan Gibbs White being interviewed, maybe like I don't know if it was like after a match or after a training session or something, right? But it's just so funny the way he looks down, he barely ever looks at the camera, and then next thing you know, the camera pans to that big fat Greek fella, and just it looks like he's just being held at gunpoint. So what do you make of that whole thing, Wes?
Um, bit of a like the whole thing, bit of a farce to be
Hmm.
fair, and a bit of a shambles. Like I was saying this to my dad yesterday, and it was like the quicker we get that flipping Italian bloke back in, Don Fabio, the better, because okay, Gibbs White not happening. On to the next one straight away. But yeah, I think from Gibbs White's perspective, it was almost like Marinakis has gone there with his like meat clover or some, butchering gear, or holding a gun to his head and
Greek
being like,
mafia
right,
and just
yeah, sign this contract, else you ain't going anywhere. So listen, Gibbs White's now been well and truly weighed in with a bit of dosh. I would have assumed at least over 180 grand a week now, because he's an England international as well, so that will hold some weight in negotiations. But am I disappointed that we didn't sign him? Yeah, because I feel like he's a player that elevates our level. And obviously, I was at the game. I know we're going to speak about it in a bit more detail in a moment, but I was at the Luton game yesterday, and the game was crying out for a player of Morgan Gibbs White's profile, someone that's comfortable receiving the ball on the half turn, someone that can drive at players, someone who can also make runs from deep. That's Morgan Gibbs White in a nutshell, and that was something we lacked in abundance yesterday. So am I a little bit disappointed? Yeah. Am I going to lose sleep over it though? Probably not. I did think we would get the deal done, even with all this legal stuff going on. So to hear and see he's done a complete sort of 360 and ended up signing a new contract was a little bit strange because he'd rejected previous offers. So, like I say, I think this one now, I think the agent's done some good work and actually gone, yeah, well, my client, I value him at this. He deserves this. And if you don't pay it, we're off. So I wouldn't say the agent's potentially held Forest to ransom on that one, but has definitely
nice
earned
job.
his commission. Yeah, he's earned his
Yeah,
commission, shall we say, on this particular deal.
yeah. It's an odd one, kind of for those you don't understand what's happened. Spurs effectively have triggered what is the release clause in his contract, so offered the exact amount they can offer to allow them to be able to talk to Morgan Gibbs White and so on. Forest have said, well, that was never public knowledge. How would you know that unless you've come to our client, or our player directly? And it's all kicked. We're not actually going to sell them to you because we believe you've done things under the table and whatnot. What I don't understand, we all play Football Manager. We all understand how these things work. Like how is it not public knowledge what a release clause is in someone's contract? And if a club does trigger that, how can you stop that happen? Do you get what I mean? Stop that happening. The only thing I am concerned about is how much time Spurs have wasted and will now waste on it, which will be a complete lost clause. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the whole thing surrounding the release clause is really interesting because someone must know about it. It has to be in his contract. Now, his contract will be a legally binding document. So the fact that it wasn't public knowledge is neither here or there for me because it's written down, like you've
Mm.
agreed it somewhere along the line. Like I say, it's in a legally binding document, which would be Morgan Gibbs White's contract. So unless we've spoken to his agent or somebody has gone, I quite like the look, I quite like Morgan Gibbs White. How much do you think we could get him for? And someone somewhere along the line's gone, do you know there's a release clause of about 60 million? And then Tottenham have
We always hear about
miraculously,
release clauses. So why is this one different to every other release clause we've heard of? Do you know what I mean?
yeah, but I don't know if it's one of them where, like you say, we've potentially gone around it and gone to his agent and effectively sweetened his agent up and gone, well, actually, if you hold fire for a little while, you'll be able to get him for 60 at this point. And then Marinakis has gone, well, hold on a minute. Not everybody knows he's got a release clause, which again I find baffling because it will be in his contract.
Exactly. That's the bit I
Um,
don't understand, right? Because we
yeah,
hear about other players. So how have any clubs found out about this release clause from other players without? Do you know what I mean?
yeah, and I think what's happened is obviously when they've bought Gibbs White and they spent quite a pretty penny on him, they've put this release clause in, and then all of a sudden Gibbs White has become an England player. And because he's now become an England player, that you pay a premium for that.
Yeah.
And it's a premium when you come into negotiation. So I think Marinakis has now gone, bugger, this geezer's actually worth more than 60 mil. So yeah, I'm going to try and squeeze a little bit more out of him. It now makes sense to me as to why City backed off because I think they've probably gone, okay, 60 is probably what we're going to go for. Any more than that, we're not going to go for it. And then they've ended up signing Reinders and Cherky for around the price they were going to get Gibbs White for anyway. And City, when it comes to negotiations, are never held to ransom. You look at other players that have been linked with City in the past, like Maguire, Alexis Sanchez, etc. Like, okay, they go to Man United, fair play. We're not going to miss out. We're not going to cry about it. We'll just move on to our next one. So I feel like Marinakis has then gone, oh, he's worth more than that. Actually, no, no, no. I'm going to kick up a fuss. I'm going to grass someone up like he's grassed up Palace. And yeah, just go threaten you with legal bit, so you back off, and then right now that they've gone, right, let's get a new contract sorted. That's what it screams to me, and I'm a bit surprised that the deal hasn't been done because we have obviously triggered that release clause. And yeah, now he's then decided to sign a new contract because there were rumours that Gibbs White would have wanted the move, but I feel like it was one of them. If he wanted the move that bad, he'd have stunk the place out by now.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, isn't it? He doesn't seem like the type of player that's just gonna, just give up down tools and all the rest of it.
Mm.
It's just my issue, and kind of most Spurs fans' issues now is it's unlikely Spurs will do what big clubs should do and say, or have already had somebody lined up. So if this happens, they can just go. Let's say there's a lot to talk about Eze because every Spurs fan wants him, right? But um, it should have got to a point where they were already working on that deal. So if this one fell apart, they could just jump straight into that one. Do you get what I mean? But it just seems like it's classic Spurs where they'll just mess about for a bit longer and probably end up with nobody. That's how it feels, really.
Yeah, yeah, and it's quite interesting because I was again saying to a couple of people that for me, if Ange's in charge, that deal gets done. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I just feel like okay, deal's stalling a bit. Let's get Ange on the phone, speak to the player, bang, in. Like, how many players were signed under Postecoglou's tenure where they said the phone call with the manager was the big selling point? Do you know what I mean, Luke?
Yeah,
So
100%, mate. I agree with you. I think if he's there and he speaks to the player is a Tottenham player, and I don't care what anyone says.
yeah. But now I'm looking at our options that could potentially be available. Xavi Simons off the table. Looks like he's going to Chelsea. Eze, well, Palace have got Europe now, so he's probably going, okay, I can kind of sit here, play Europe for a year, maybe get my move next year. Or if I want to go now, I've got a choice. Arsenal are sort of up there challenging for the league, etc., etc. Tottenham, we've been interested in Eze for like well over 5 years, so I feel like if we'd have
If we
done an
wanted
Eze
him,
deal,
we'd have gone and got him.
we'd have done it by now. I think the time to get Eze was probably last year, but that one is, um, I think it's one of those where the deal itself to get Eze shouldn't be the hardest deal that Tottenham can do. It should be, in effect, one of the easiest deals that Tottenham should be able to do. But it's Tottenham, so I look forward to hearing about some random player that we've ended up buying. But just remember Levy's comments where he wants to win the Premier League and the Champions League. We're not acting like a club that wants to do that. Morgan
No,
Rogers will not happen. Villa have slapped an absolutely ridiculous price tag on him. Cracking player, don't get me wrong, but we ain't paying what Villa want, unfortunately. Dad.
no. No, I agree. I agree. Just for those not watching, yeah, there was a comment about Morgan Rogers, and yeah, look, it it's such a tricky one, right? Because you look at a team like Liverpool, they
Yeah.
just literally, as far as I'm aware, agreed a deal to sell Luis Diaz, which to me will then trigger them to go and buy Alexander Isak. I was talking with somebody at barbecue yesterday, and I said the only reason they haven't gone for Isak is because they want to sell Diaz first. As soon as they agree a deal with Bayern Munich to sell Diaz, they'll go and buy Alexander Isak, and I believe that's what will happen in the next probably 5 to 7 days from now. That transfer will happen, and he will sign for Liverpool, because that's how big clubs act. They've gone and probably spanked 400 million. This transfer window
After winning the league, by the way.
after winning the league. Exactly. That's how a big club goes and acts. Not gets to a Champions League final and then doesn't sign anybody for the next two windows because this squad were good enough to get us to that point. Not after winning a Europa League and then sacking the manager and saying, well, we want to win Premier League and Champions Leagues, and then signing one player that we had on loan for 6 months who scored 2 goals or 3 goals, and then
A
um,
bit harsh on my mate Kev, but I think it's a bit
and
harsh.
then got and bought somebody from West Ham who scored about 3 goals last season as well. Like these are average signings, which are great for squad players, but they're not what teams should be doing to go and press on to go and achieve things that owners of the football club suggest they want to win, which clearly they don't. Because if they did, they would go and act like a big club. I don't want to hear any more nonsense about money. I don't want to hear any more nonsense about the fact that we need to sell players to, you know, to buy. Spurs haven't bought spend decent money on decent players. Look at Arsenal, right? You can talk all you want about Gyökeres, but they needed a striker, and they went out and they bought probably, apart from Isak, which I don't know why they didn't go for Isak because they were interested in him, before he signed for Newcastle.
Yeah, I think Isak. I don't know why they didn't get him at Sociedad because they've bought everybody else from there. But I think now the price tag for Isak is way too much for Arsenal. Arsenal now they've got Gyökeres in. Yes, they've got Zubamendi, they got Norgard and Kepa and Mosquera. Now Arsenal's focus has to be on getting rid of some of their deadwood and some of their squad players. I'm looking at players like Zinchenko,
But I
Fabio
mean, like they're
Vieira.
spending quite a lot on Gyökeres to go and spend another 40 million or so to go and get Isak. You know,
Yeah, but I think with Arsenal it's slightly different. I think Liverpool can afford because Liverpool didn't really spend anything last year. So if you
yeah,
look at their balance sheets now in terms of their 3 year cycle for PSR, they're probably splash it. They're a bit similar to Chelsea after they come out their transfer ban, where Lampard had 250 odd million pounds worth of players. But if you look at it and go, well, actually, probably half of that would have been the year before if they were able to. And I think Liverpool are probably in that similar moment where they've gone, right, well, we'll spend 400 million at once. And then I think you'll see Liverpool then go a little bit quiet. Obviously, they went quiet last season, and I think the next 2 years I anticipate to be really quiet for Liverpool. But like you say, deal agreed for Diaz. Nunes is apparently rumoured to be, leaving. Harvey Elliott is up for a negotiation one way or another. So there are some players there for Liverpool that they could get rid of. Obviously, Shimikas and or Robertson could be one in that left back slot as well. So I think Liverpool are being very strategic in how they do things. But even United have done more than us. We beat them in the Europa League final, and they've gone and got Mbuemo and Cunha straight away. Like they're
It's
they're
crazy,
trying
really.
to
Like,
address it. They're trying to address their issue, whereas we are sitting on our hands and going, poor, yeah, Chelsea again, made over 100 million out of the Club World Cup. They've already spent it. So that extra revenue that Chelsea have generated from that Club World Cup, they've already spent. So they're going again, and everybody's going, well, how are they able to do it? Well, they've got some very clever accountants, and I mean, they've just sold. I think it must be their sixth choice goalkeeper. Got that many to Bournemouth for 25 million. Like, do you know what I mean? They do really well, Chelsea, in terms of selling players. Like Joao Felix off to Saudi, 40 million. Like, mate, he was out on loan. They bombed him out on loan last year to AC Milan because they didn't fancy him. There's rumours that Nkunku, who I think would actually be a really good signing for Spurs, but I think Nkunku's up for sale as well. So yeah, Chelsea do sell as well as buying everybody.
yeah, and I think kind of going back to my comments on Arsenal, like the point really was I got sidetracked by Isak, but the point was that they wanted a striker and they go out and buy probably what is one of the top strikers that could be bought, in this window of Gyökeres, and the point matters that clubs that want to win things and clubs that have ambitious owners, when they realize there is something that needs to be done, they go out and do it. Like, okay, that position for Spurs wasn't really necessary. If you look at like Kulusevski and Madison, those two players could play in that position. That an Eze could play on Morgan Gibbs White. Having an extra player like that would be great. I mean, I was only against Wycombe, but you saw Papsar playing a little bit higher up in that game. He got 2 goals for us. We'll talk about that. So there are players that can play a bit further up. So it wasn't an essential position. But the left back option is getting scary at the moment because the doggy misses out on the preseason tour.
Mhm.
So now who have we got? I think we played Jamie Donnelly there yesterday. Or we got Ben Davis. Because that's what we're sitting at as a left back option. Like, how can we sit there in 2025 and probably end up starting the season with Ben Davis at left back?
Nah, I like Ben Davis. I like
Yeah,
Ben
but
Davis.
there's a difference between liking Ben Davis and having a squad that can go and win the league, win the Champions League. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, but I think Ben Davis gets a lot of unfair criticism, in my opinion, from the fan base, right? Because I think,
We
look,
can't go on nostalgia though, can we?
no,
That's the
I'm not
point.
going off this. Like, I just think if, like, majority of squads that have been successful have at least one player that is in a similar mold to Ben Davis. And I mean that in the sense of you look at Liverpool, for example, they had James Milner, right? Not the
Uh-huh.
flashiest tool in the box, all right? But if you want somebody to give 100% every single day in training and set your standards and you know what you're going to get near enough week in, week out, at Liverpool, that guy was James Milner. Do you know what I mean? I think Ben Davis is our version of that, but the thing is Ben Davis is a defender, whereas obviously Milner went into Liverpool as a midfielder. So I think midfielders tend to get away with it a little bit, and then Milner ended up covering everybody else. He was like the utility man. But there's always at least one player that is at a club that is like a very, very good squad player that knows when to be called upon, that they're going to do their job well, doesn't kick up a fuss, and actually is fantastic around the place and around the dressing room day to day and gives 100%. Trust me, you need those players in your squad. Like, look at where Davis has had to play centre half, left back, left wing back. Has he moaned? Has he bugger? And I think there's a
But
reason
it's
why. There's a
worrying,
reason.
to go into the start of the season with him as your starting left back. That's my point.
Yeah, but then I think for me, like I look at Ben Davis's career at Tottenham, especially as a left back, and I could probably only pick one winger that's actually tore him a new one. And that winger's Sadio Mane. But he was doing that to like everybody at that specific moment in time when he was tearing Ben Davis a new one. I don't think he's really been like exposed like in one, especially in 1v1 situations as a fullback when you get a lot of those as a fullback. So yeah, I get what you mean in terms of yes, we probably need somebody else there, but from my point of view, I am not as harsh on Ben Davis as 95% of the fan base. So I'm in the 5% that call him the Welsh Maldini and Daddy Davis.
Fair enough. David Clark said Kudus is a good signing. I'll remind you of your comment about him at Christmas time, and I think you may change your mind. Might be difficult to do, but we'll discuss that in a bit. So, right, let's talk about yesterday for a little bit, and then we'll kind of go back onto what Spurs need moving into. Do you know what? We'll talk about a bit about Arsenal as well before that, because obviously we've got Arsenal next in our pre-season tour on our trip to Hong Kong. It's always nice seeing North London derby played in Hong Kong, isn't it? But
Yeah. That was one on my bucket list. That one, yeah.
I know someone who's got tickets to that. It's a long old trip, isn't it, to
Yeah, it's
go and
not.
watch a
Yeah. It's not exactly a
pre-season.
trick round the corner, is it? Do you know what I mean?
Right, so yesterday Spurs had two games, double header, one at the training ground and one at Luton. We played Wycombe at 11 o'clock, which is actually the only game that I managed to see. At least there was goals in it because I was at a barbecue in the afternoon. Yeah, so um, watch that on thanks to Callum on Spurs Play, and it was just odd. It was just an odd game, right? Some of the players were kind of like hanging about because obviously they got there before going to on the coach or whatever to Luton, so they were hanging around. It was a bit of an odd match, but it was a nice little watch. It didn't. It was weird that certain players played in that game and then obviously didn't play in the Luton game. So obviously, like watching, I didn't mind it actually. Back to centre back pairing of Vuskovic and Christian Romero. Well, it was odd to see Romero, and I'd like to have seen his comments with Thomas Frank about why he ended up being the one playing at the training ground match rather than actually what was looked more like a proper match. But so is the way. Um, Again, bit of a messy game, and the reason why I want to mention this about Brandon Austin is because obviously the first goal that we conceded was like an error from his side, right? And look, it's pre-season, and you watch the new Liverpool goalkeeper also made an error yesterday, right? So it's not a big deal. But it's more that I just saw. I don't know how accurate this is, but Lille are interested in loaning Anton Kinski this season from Spurs. Now, again, I don't know how true that is or how good the sources are reporting that, but the last thing we want to do after what we had last season is loan out our substitute goalkeeper, who's probably very close to being as good as Vicario, in my opinion. What do you make of that?
I can't see Kinski going. Purely off of. I know there was a lot of talk of Josh Keeley. I didn't watch the game yesterday, the Wycombe game. Went to Luton instead. Never again, I have to profess. But yeah, I can't see Kinski leaving. I know, and there was a lot of talk of Josh Keeley potentially coming into the goalkeeper setup. Obviously, he's gone to Luton, so I can't see Kinski being loaned out. I think we'll need him, Anthony Kinski. So yeah, obviously to hear that Austin made an error leading to a goal isn't great. But then if anybody's seen Doncaster trying to play out from the back at the
Oh, yeah, I
weekend,
saw that.
they'll
Yeah, the
they'll
keeper fell
realise
over the ball.
yeah, they'll realise that it's becoming more of a commonality now because every team has to play out from the back. So it'll be quite nice when Sean Dyche gets another job because he'll just get the goalkeeper to twat it 50 yards up the pitch. So that'll be quite nice. So yeah, it's obviously not ideal, but it's a case of is what it is. I think Romero was probably telling Thomas Frank to put his bloody tactics board away and actually give some proper instructions on the bloody sideline. So that'd have been interesting because I don't think Romero's English is the best, and I can't see Thomas Frank knowing Spanish or Portuguese, to be honest.
Yeah, it's all a bit interesting this preseason, right? I've never seen it. I've heard that clubs or other clubs have done it this preseason actually, but it's interesting to see that, and it will keep a few of the fans quiet who said, Ange never um, worked on tactics and so on. Well, this manager's so interested in tactics that he's had scheduled 2 games on the same day and playing different teams and all over the shop. So who knows what will happen moving forward? But the error from Brandon Austin, right? What happened is the winger from Wycombe cuts in and cuts in and cuts in. Comes in from the right hand side and cuts in on his left foot and cuts in his P roller from the edge of the box. And Brandon Austin goes down to just collect the ball, and it just bubbles through his legs, and it goes through his hands and under his legs and into the back of the net. So it was a bit of an error, but 2 goals from Papsar, which was nice to see. First one was good, actually, really reactive play. So the shot comes in, and he's reacting and just bundles it in, and decent kind of finish for the second goal as well. So it's nice to see him getting a few goals in pre-season, and really I think the test will be in the next few games. We played obviously a few League One sides in pre-season so far. We've then got to go and play Arsenal. I think we've got Bayern Munich, have we?
Yeah, I think we got Newcastle as well.
Yeah, but Newcastle are getting battered by everyone, so no doubt they'll beat us.
Yeah, Dr. Tottenham will see you now, nice and early.
Exactly. But yeah, what do you make? The squad's been released for the tour. What do you make of
Well,
that?
it's quite interesting because obviously a lot of fans love Mikey Moore. Um, I was at the Luton game, as I mentioned a minute ago, and Mikey Moore was not great. Granted, the other however many players that played, and especially when he was on the pitch, weren't great either. But I think the double header for me felt like Frank has got the more senior players, but he seems to like a lot of the younger lads, like a Mikey, Alfie Devine, Lancashire, Vuskovic, like all of those sort of younger lads that we've got. George Abbott being another one who's just signed a new contract today. So yeah, it just feels like he wanted to try and give the minutes, but the downside was especially with the Luton one, you got your doggy went off injured in the warm up, Solanke had a knock, and then it feels like we're massively stretched again. Um, but yeah, Mikey Moore is not a number 10. He doesn't possess the intelligence for me right now to play as a 10. I think he needs to play as a left winger, which then poses a couple of good questions then because we'll have Tell, who I think again is a left winger, can't play as a 9. I think I've been through that one before. Odebear can play on the left. You'll have Son up until probably up until the career tour, and once that's done, he's probably off. So yeah, I think it just throws up an interesting thing, and the fact that he's not going to pursue potentially a loan move is quite interesting as well. So Scarlett, him not being there, I feel like it could be potentially time to sort of part ways with Dane Scarlett, because I feel like if he was to break in, he'd have done it by now. He's had, for me, the opportunities pre-season to really make his mark, and I don't think he's really done it. Obviously, scored an important goal in our Europa League run last year, but yeah, like I said, I just don't feel like he's taken that opportunity that he's been given, and I think it's gone on for a little while now. This is a kid that Mourinho gave a debut to, so that's how long we're looking
Yeah,
at
and he's
here.
got. You see all these youngsters kind of breaking through, and youngsters that have broken through from different clubs at different levels and
Mhm.
different seasons, and he's getting to that age now where if it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. And
Yeah.
he came on yesterday, didn't he, for Tell? Um,
Which was baffling because Scarlett's not a left winger, like at all.
yeah,
He's bulked up a little bit. I did think though under Mourinho he would end up being more like a Rashford type of player where he ends up out on that left hand side, but he's definitely bulked up, and now I feel like he's not a left winger. But then I don't feel like he can kind of make it at Tottenham as a number nine. I feel like he'd be a great. I know we play Football Manager, Luke. So he's always one that you sign when you're a Championship club.
yeah.
Dane Scarlett. So I feel like that could be his level. And he could. I think he's going to be one of them that
There's
if
nothing
he's
wrong with that.
available, they'll get. No, there isn't. I feel like he'll be one of those that if he becomes available, you'll have a host of clubs going for. But I feel like it'll be one that his goal record doesn't necessarily back up the hype, and there's plenty of them around. Trust me, there's plenty of them around.
Yeah. There's also options, that there could be teams across Europe looking at a young English player and saying, this is someone that we want for our team as well. So there's definitely options out there, and he could have an amazing career. It's just that, do I see him becoming a Spurs legend? Like for the likes of Harry Kane, right? No. I just think
Mhm.
he would have had that time by now. And you see it happen often, especially in pre-season. These young players, they come on, they do get goals here and there, and it just has been a while. Obviously got an important goal in the Europa League, but it's been a while since you kind of see him come on and really make an impact as a striker. And it would be really like a last throw of the dice. If we were late on in the game and say, I'll just bring him on to try and get a goal, because you're clutching at straws. You're 50-50 chance whether he's going to score or not score, so make an impact or not. So I think
Mhm.
you're probably right. And yeah, it's nice to see Mikey Moore getting minutes, but I think you're right. I think he is more of a winger. Um, I felt like Divine made more of an impact in that position in the Reading game than
Mhm.
Moore did in the Luton game.
Yeah.
But, you know, we can't be too critical of any of these games or manager or players at this point, right? 'Cause it's all just. I'd love to know the theory behind why which team plays in which game and why certain players are picked. I hope it's not just random. I hope there's some actual knowledge behind it. Like, why did Romero play in that game and Danson and Van der Ven play in this game?
Why didn't they just use a random generator? Like, right, two teams, let's go, lads. Bush. Why didn't they go for that? Either that or they've drawn the names out of a hat, one of the two.
When I was
Um,
looking at the lineups and I saw Johnson on the left, Kudus on the right, Tell in the middle, and Moore as a 10, and then Donnelly at left back, I thought someone might have done a random generator, to be honest.
well, I think the interesting thing for me was when I was looking at it, obviously, yeah, the Wycombe game was at the training ground, probably because we couldn't play a game at our stadium because of concerts, typically. So that's probably why it was at the training ground. But then I'm looking at it going, Jesus, that's quite a strong team. So then I'm going, right, well, who on earth am I going to be watching then at Luton?
Yeah.
But then I still think there was probably enough on the pitch in both to be able to get positive results. And the slight concern for me is that, yes, I know it's pre-season, but for large parts of the games, we've struggled against three League One sides. Like that's not fantastic. Like, do you know what I mean? Like to struggle against one, you'd probably go, all right, yeah. Like Reading, you go, all right, yeah, first one back, get minutes. But to then have a double header where you struggle in both, and again yesterday, Christ, it was a tough watch. Like it was a tough watch. Um, but I mean, credit to the away end because when kick off like and everything else, it was a bit lively, and then I think we all started watching us play, and we're going, this is a bit tough to watch. Positives from the Luton game: Brennan Johnson beat his man for the first time in about 2 years. So Kudus was probably the best of a bad bunch. Um, for me, he looks like he when he gets the ball, he wants to make something happen. So I like that a lot. But yeah, I think Frank's comments after the games were a bit interesting as well because it felt like the priority was to get 75 minutes into legs, and I'm like, yeah, but mate, we've played terribly. Like the patterns that you would want to be working on in training, you want to see them come out in games. They're not there. Like, come on now. Like you're now going into a tour where you're playing against Prem teams and you're still not quite seeing things in action. So yeah, that was the bit of a concern for me, was the patterns weren't there. It wasn't fluid, and yes, you make loads and loads of changes, but how many other clubs do it, and yet the player that is coming on to replace somebody, they're still in tune to whatever they have, the other coaches are doing. But it feels like whenever that thing applies to Tottenham, it doesn't work, which is really annoying, really frustrating. But listen, at 70 odd minutes, Thomas Frank got his tactics board out again, so all the casuals will be buzzing with that one.
So one of the things I noticed really quickly was that in the Wycombe game, it's actually interesting because I only watched the Wycombe game and you only watched the Luton game. So
Yeah.
one of the things I did notice is that, especially with Frank, it seems that in build-up from attacks, we were going into a three at the back. So Ben Davies would come across, and then Romero would move in. So Romero was playing left centre back, so he would move to then a central centre back, and then Vuskovic was playing right centre back, then he would go over to a kind of right back position or right central position, allowing Pedro Porro to go up and attack. Did we see anything like that with Donnelly or Spence, in the Luton game, or would you not have noticed? Sorry, it's a really random one.
Yeah. So Donnelly played inverted a lot of
Right.
the time, but it was really strange because you had Van der Ven as like that left-footed centre back, maraud forward. Danso was the middle centre back, but then we didn't really have any. But so Spence was also going
Oh, okay.
flying up high up the pitch, so it was a bit of a strange one in the sense of we were trying to build up in a 3 and a 2, but it I don't think Spence looked 100% comfortable in that like role, because it was almost like he was trying to go up and then it was like, no, I can't, I've got to stay. But he's not. He's more of a,
Attacker.
I wouldn't say an old school fullback, but a fullback of 10 years ago, high and wide
Yeah, yeah, like
fullback.
overlapping.
Yeah. I think that's probably Spence's strength. But Donnelly looked so out of place, like a fish out of water. It was ridiculous. And yes, Jed Spence's mum was absolutely loving life in the away end, and my dad got a nice picture with her
Oh, no.
yesterday. So yeah, but it just didn't. It was an experiment for me that did not work because we didn't dominate that middle of the park. Um, and it was almost like ball got into Archie Gray, head up, clip it over the top, get your winger 1v1. I'm like, mate, I've played in teams that get it to a central midfielder and clip it channels, and it was horrible to play in. So, and I mean, I'm not saying I was the worst footballer in the world or the best, but I played at a half decent standard, and do you know what I mean? It feels like, well, I'm watching shit that I used to play in 10, 12 years ago, and I'd rather not, to be honest. So yeah, and then it kind of like we got into the final third and we just lacked ideas at Luton, and I think that's probably why we had 66% of the ball and only had 2 shots. But the most baffling thing was with those stats, Luke, Josh Keeley got man of the match. Didn't have a shot to save and got man of the match. Work that one out.
Wild, wild. Um,
His mum and
so
dad, his mum and dad must have been sponsoring the game or something, and gone, yeah, sorry, we'll give it to him. He was ironically, he did play like well in terms of his distribution, but it was kind of that thing of like, why is one of the better players on the pitch somebody that we sold to Luton last week? Like, do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Evening to Spurs diehards. Thank you very, very much for tuning in. Thank you to everybody for tuning in actually tonight. Loads and loads and loads of comments. I will try and go through some quickly. So, what's the point? FC has said, guys, how long is the Asian tour? I believe it's a week.
Yeah,
Um,
too long. Yeah, is the
yeah,
honest answer.
and
That's
then
how
we've got
long
to
it
come
lasts for.
back because then we've got to go to Udinese and
Yeah, get
play in the
slapped
Super
by
Cup.
PSG.
And then it's Premier League time. So Jay has also said, what would be your thoughts if we signed Morgan Rogers from Villa? I mean,
I'd be
I'd consider
buzzing. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong. I'd be absolutely buzzing if we got him, and I think we'll have a new celebration to get our heads around. But I just can't see it. I think if we're likely to get anybody from one of those attacking positions at Villa, for me, the one that makes the most sense is Jacob Ramsey.
yeah, I think that's
Um,
the more likely option as well. To be
yeah,
fair,
and I think obviously with Villa with PSR constraints, it's pure profit because he's an academy graduate. But again, Villa will want at least upwards of 50 mil, and that's
yeah,
not even for an England international.
Yeah, I think it's way too much money for him. But we'll talk very briefly in a second about who we think we should sign. Jason, it'll be interesting to see what the score is for the preseason game against Arsenal, first one to be played outside of the UK. What's interesting is it's on Thursday at 12:30 in the afternoon, so everyone enjoy that one.
Yeah, yeah. Good luck with that. Good luck with
Yeah, I
that.
was actually worried because I joined the football team last week. New news for everybody. Not
Okay,
exciting. It's not exciting. So I live up in Scotland, and there's the local community. There's a football team that's all about inclusivity and fun, and so there's people of all ages, over 35. So I'm in that bracket now,
that's
and
that's that's called vets football. That Luke.
yeah, just a bit of fun, and was hilarious. I went to train on Thursday night. It was absolutely hilarious. But so I signed up, and games were on Thursday nights. When I saw the North London Derby was on, sorry, trains on Thursday nights and games on Sundays. So when I saw North London Derby was on Thursday, I thought, oh, best not be on in the evening. Oh, not to panic. 12:30 at lunchtime. So
You're
plenty of
sorted. You're
time.
flying. You are flying.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So let's talk about who we should sign then. Right. Let's look at what 5-10 minutes left. Let's talk about who Spurs should sign. Look, we've clearly got some money, and there's been rumours throughout this, window that Spurs have got outside investment from Saudis. So if we have got some money to spend, who should we spend it on? Right? If we're willing to spend 60 million on Morgan Gibbs White, who should we sign, and what positions should we sign them in? Personally, I think we should sign a left back. I don't know who, right? But we should. Um, it's tricky to know like who we should get because we did have, and I mean everyone can state Sergio Reguilon, right? But we just let him go on a free transfer, and he'd have done a job for the time being. The fact that the doggy's out, and if we have Ben Davies as well. But is there any other positions you think we should get? Like I personally want us to get Garnacho. Like I don't know why. That's just who I want Spurs to sign. But we don't need another left winger.
We'd have to. I think the left winger position is a case of sell to buy
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one, but Garnacho attitude honks for me. So I'm. It's a bit of a. If we can avoid it, great.
But
If he
I
comes
think a
in
deal can
terms,
be done, and that's what I'm thinking, right? United clearly want to sell him. He's clearly a talented player. Like, okay, there is that attitude at the moment, but somebody will take United up on that, and they could end up with a decent player. Is whether you're willing to take that risk, and I think it's worth.
yeah. I mean, obviously he did come on in the Europa League final and change the game for United. So it wasn't literally like why is this guy been on the bench? Like he was the only sort of direct attacking outlet that United had, all night. I agree. I think there's a player in there. Um, Maybe if you get Cootie to get his arm around him and kick the bad attitude, literally in training out of him, then yeah. But I think for me there are other priority positions for
Yeah,
Spurs, and yeah, I think if we go in for Garnacho, that's a deadline day one because I don't
right.
see him moving beforehand because I think he's
Oh, because
gonna.
Spurs, because United want him gone, and Spurs just wait and say if he's still there,
Yeah,
cheeky little 30 million bid and see what happens, type of
if
thing.
if that, because Spurs, Levy in particular, will play on United to the fact they just want him gone. So that's got a Daniel Levy last minute deal written all over it. Signing options. Let's have a look at these. Eze would love it. Can't see it. Wharton would be my top priority for a six. Not happening. Harvey Elliott should be on Love Island. James McAtee, yes, please. I think for a player of that quality to be available at that price, at 20 to 25 million, loads of clubs should be all over that, to be honest. Grealish, no, ship sailed. 29 hitting 30, 300 grand a week, ain't going to happen. Hayden Hackney's my second choice for me for the number six position. Really liked it, really like him. And Borough, I don't know what kind of financial state they're in. Obviously, they've got rid of Michael Carrick, brought in Rob Edwards. They'll want to keep hold of him. I think that one, I'd like it, but I don't think it will happen. Again, I think we'll probably go later on in the window. Hayden Hackney, it could be one that we sign if we sell Basuma. João Paulinho is not for me. I mean, he was great at Fulham, but he's not really had a look in at Bayern when he's got his big moves. So Douglas Luiz, I can see the appeal, but I
It
don't.
always seems like just like options that we could have had 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Jazari, I'm not going to profess to know who he is, so
No, I
going
don't
to
know who
brush
that is
that one
either.
under the carpet. Mark Gay ain't going to happen. Probably moving to Liverpool next year, if not this summer. Xavi Simons off to Chelsea.
There we go.
Question.
That's what we call Wes's transfer roundup.
Literally. I mean,
So
we should
right,
have had Adam Wharton. Sorry, Luke. We should have had Adam Wharton for 18 million when he was at Blackburn,
yeah.
and now we're looking at up to 100 million because he's at Palace. So typical Spurs could have had Eze for 20 million at QPR. Now we've got to pay near enough treble to get him out of Palace. So yeah,
So let's say you're Daniel Levy right now, and
Christ.
you've got to have your sensible head on, right?
Yes.
Who do you go out and try and get for Spurs? Who should Spurs
Um,
try and get?
Well, in terms of the left-sided player, the player that I really wanted, and again is another one that's gone to Chelsea, is Joel Hato from Ajax,
Right.
was the captain for the Netherlands under-21s team in the summer, captain of Ajax at 18. Again, that speaks volumes. Can cover at least three positions: left centre back, left wing back, and will no doubt be one of the best centre backs in Europe should things all go well for him. No doubts about that. My ideal, my number one for the six has always been Adam Wharton. Um, and then my second choice is Hayden Hackney because I think Hayden Hackney will give us also a little bit of a physical presence in midfield. He's a big boy, Hayden Hackney, and he's also got a lot of legs. And those that watch him in the Championship and watch Championship football will know what I'm on about. Those are the two priority positions for me for Tottenham for this window. And then, like I say, the left winger one, we sell Son. I think we potentially get somebody in. Um, and maybe I think the bonus one is the 10 position. Um, and I think that's why it was like Morgan Gibbs White kind of come out of nowhere
Yeah.
and we're going flipping out, right? Okay, fantastic because of that a player of that quality we were getting, who's Premier League proven, who is classed as homegrown as well, which I know are two um, things that are kind of high on the priority list for Tottenham this window. Getting in more Premier League proven players, but also trying to strengthen the homegrown quota as well because we are light on that. We've also got this club trained player issue as well, which is why I think the Walker Peters deal wouldn't have been the worst one in the world if we did get him, just because he covers that base, can cover right and left back.
From West Ham
As
now. Is it West Ham?
he has gone to West Ham, yeah, and there was obviously rumours of Dennis Sirkin coming back from Sunderland again to cover that left-sided player in the back, and also the club trained thing as well would have gone down an absolute treat. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting remaining few weeks of the window for Spurs. So yeah, I think yeah, like I say, those are my three. Now Hato's likely to go to Chelsea. The other player that I can really only think of that would cover multiple positions would be Hincapie from Leverkusen, but I don't think they're going to sell given what they've already let go at this
Yeah,
stage.
yeah.
And
It's,
Ten Hag is also a big fan of a left-footed centre back. He had it at Ajax with Lisandro Martinez and Daley Blin. Had it again when he went to United. He brought Lisandro Martinez with him, so I anticipate Hincapie to stay. So who we get in now, I've got no idea because I think Hanko from Feyenoord would have probably been relatively up there, but he's gone to Atletico.
it's getting to a point now where Spurs claim they wanted all the business done before this tour, and yet they've got pretty much none of the business done. Apart from telling Kudus. So only time will tell what will happen.
Hey,
Right?
see what you
Yeah.
did there.
There's a
See
very
what you
good
did
question
there.
here. Is there anyone left to buy?
No, because Chelsea bought them all.
Exactly. Right, that kind of does wrap us up for tonight's show. But I will let you know some news just before we do finished tonight. So for those of you that follow me on Twitter, will know that I did announce that I will be leaving the channel in actually 2 weeks before the end of the season. So no reason apart from I've just got loads of personal things on at the moment that, means that I will have to step away from the podcast. Maybe in the future I will come back. I don't know. I know that Dave, he should be back soon. Hopefully he's not very well at the moment, so he should be carrying on the channel. But I just want to let everybody know that that's what's going to happen over the coming weeks. As I said, maybe one day I'll come back. When I'm invited, I'll definitely come back for shows. But I want the 10th of August will be my last show. So tell all your friends, try and get as many of us on, and we'll try and get some extra special people on as well, and try and have a kind of good show before we finish up before the start of the season. But I do want you all to keep watching, obviously. The likely lads should still be on, so still keep tuning in, and should be a good season for Spurs. Wes, thanks again for coming on, matey. Thanks for that. Someone just said, take it easy, don't cry live on stream. I'll try not to. Could have cried when Ange left. No, I'm only joking. But Wes, thanks again for being on. Tell everybody how they can find you and what you've got going on at the moment.
Yeah, so Twitter's at Wezo10, as everybody knows, unofficial Moose Dembele fan account will probably be the unofficial Kevin Danso fan account by the end of this current season. So usually tweeting about best Belgium's greatest Premier League. I'm going to keep my thoughts on the manager relatively blunt on there. Instagram is at Wezo32. Like I said, I was at Luton yesterday. I will be at the Burnley game. So yeah, if anybody wants to see me and say hello, come grab me pre-match. We've got to dip fairly swiftly afterwards. Not my fault. Someone else's. And then anything football coaching related is Kickoff Football Academy or Code for MK. We've got lots going on this summer with lots and lots of football camps and other sessions as well. So yeah, if there is anybody watching that is from Milton Keynes, get in touch because we'd love to help your child along their footballing journey.
Amazing. Yes, do go follow Wes on all of his accounts. I do think sometimes you just change your Instagram account or your Twitter account to make it sure it's the same, because then it's easy for people to find. But then it wouldn't be such a long-winded explanation of all your handles, would it?
Exactly. Got to think smart, Luke.
Exactly. Perfect. Look, thank you so much for everybody who tuned in again tonight. Really do appreciate you all. We'll be back next Sunday, 7 p.m. for another episode of Partly Podcast. But until then, as always, a massive come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.